Dawson Rider Wiki.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here. Welcome to my review for the Hasbro Zeo Megazord. Before you get too excited, it is not the combining version, it is just a large-scale figure, but it is a Hasbro-released version of the Zeo Megazord in this interesting way, an interesting first choice of this sort of new subline, I guess, of larger Megazords. Before we got started, though, I wanted to just show off the box because they're clearly using the classic style packaging that they used during the Zeo series. I mean, I guess it makes sense, but I guess they got the rights to how Bandai designed the boxes back in the day, because they're doing the same thing with those automorphins. And it shows stuff on the side here, and on the back, and you know, it's just a pretty cool box for box collectors, and I like that they're lining it up with the way the Zeo stuff looked. It almost makes me feel like it's a release from the Legacy collection. But now let's get to the actual. So here we have him in here, and like I said, he's already all together. He's basically a large-scale action figure. The only thing you have to do is put this on, put whatever helmet you want on, and the wings, which are removable here, and you can take them off like this, and they just go on with 4 little pegs, and they stay on fairly securely. So if you want to display it without the wings open, you can do that. But that's literally all the assembly that's required. And this is a pretty neat release, and I think it's a pretty neat way to start this off. I certainly welcome more things like this. Honestly, sometimes it's nice just to have the Megazord in a cool posable fashion and not have to worry about transforming it. That being said, let's go ahead and get over the negatives, or not get over them, but go over them and then get over them first before I get started. So proportion-wise, he is a little bit lanky compared to what the show suit looks like, if that's what you're interested in. The suit's a little bit blockier. I will show a comparison to the original 90s version here in a second, but if you want to get nitpicky, that depends on if that's something that bothers you or not. It's not a huge deal to me, but he definitely feels a little more slender than the Zeo Megazord should be, and I can't help but think of that cheapo Red Racer Zord that's like just a statue, and it's kind of poorly painted, but it honestly looks the closest I've ever seen to the in-show suit, and I would love for something like that to be articulated and it be both articulated and close to the proportions. So if that's a huge deal to you, like I said, it's not a huge deal to me, but it would be nice to have less lanky proportions, and I did notice that. And also, some of the paint discrepancies look a little bit cheap for me. Like, the gold here looks nice. This gold looks nice. But this one looks strangely cheap to me. Maybe it's just me, not to mention it doesn't match and it looks a little weird. The waist here, too, for the bison looks a little bit cheap, too, a little bit. Like, some of it just looks a little bit cheap to me just in the overall look. And when I say cheap, I don't mean like, oh, this is really cheap, bad looking. I more so mean for the price you're paying, I expected to look a little bit more premium, if that makes any sense. Now, getting that out of the way though, and I'll circle back around to it, I still think it's pretty cool. Just going over it, you know, setting aside some of my complaints with it, I think it still looks pretty neat. It does have some nice details on it, and you know, outside of the lankiness, the proportions of the helmet and stuff look pretty good. It's a pretty impressive looking guy. I like to be able to pose him, which is pretty nice. And then these here actually have really nice gold paint, especially these. They really shine well. And you know, it's not a bad looking Megazord figure by any means. It's just for the price, about 60 to 70 bucks, depending on where you pick it up. I just expected it to be a little more premium. It kind of reminds me when I buy a figure art and it feels like it's made of glass. And that's kind of the same vibe I get here. And the sword is not part of it. You know, it's individual. You can put it in and out. That's what, you know, a lot of swords are like that. But I just have it in there for the sake of it. It only comes with the 2 hands, which is holding his sword hands. Thank you. And then this sort of force choke hand, this like Palpatine hand you got going. It would have been cool to have some alternate hands if you wanted to swap it, but it's not a huge deal, and I actually really like the way this one looks. For a split second, I thought it was one of those ones where all the fingers are individually articulated. Speaking of articulation, brilliant segue by my boy Dawson. Sorry, I just referred to myself in the third person, but it's got very good articulation. You have a nice 360 movement here. You have a little bit of in and out movement here where before you get to the shoulder pad there. How did you notice these? And you have swiveling right here. You have pretty much a double elbow joint here. You have swiveling at the fist, and that almost popped off just now. And then you have a nice joint here, which can go back and forth. It's a little bit stiff for mine. You have nice swiveling here. You have basically a single joint on the knee here, and then you have a little bit of a toe joint there. And then you have a very weird joint here where this kind of swivels and moves, but it can't go all the way around. Unless mine's just sticky and I don't want to force it, but it is a little bit weird for me. So I don't know what's going on with that. It feels like I can move it, but I can't, and it's a little bit wobbly. Weebles wobbles, but they don't fall down, so that's a little bit strange, but it's very well articulated, and I think that's obviously the core draw of this. You know, lots of people have wanted articulated Megazord figures, you know, just kind of in the normal scale, but it's cool to have one in a larger fashion, especially since we're so used to the mecha bricks. It's nice to be able to have this. But now let me go ahead and quickly bring in the original 90s release just to compare. Okay, so here they are next to each other, looking like a thanks Hydroxycut ad. So as you can see, this guy's shorter and he's a little bit fatter. So it's okay to say, oh, you're 5 feet on dating sites, you should be dead. Anyway, so you can see the difference there. And honestly, with the exception of the fact that I think his thighs are a little bit too thick, or his feet are a little bit too thick, this one's actually a little bit more accurate in terms of the proportions of the Megazord in the show, at least from what I can remember. Not perfect, but he's a little bit less of a svelte guy that we have going on here. And honestly, like, again, I'm not trying to knock this one because I think this is pretty cool in a lot of ways, but this kind of holds up surprisingly well. Like, if you're not worried about it being articulated outside of its thunder thighs, it actually looks pretty nice, like, compared for being like from the 90s, you know what I mean? But so you can see the sort of differences there. Now, that's not all. That's not all, folks. There is also swappable heads. If you remember, the Zeo Megazord has swappable heads, and on this one, they were all kind of built into him. But this guy comes with the swappable alternate heads. I'm going to cut away to a montage of some photos of them side by side, and then I'll give my thoughts. So, but montage. So yeah, for the heads, I think it's really cool they included them. I think that they didn't have to do that. They could have easily skipped that, and then it could have saved money, and it would have still been a pretty cool release. But I really appreciate that they did that. That being said, the heads are really off for me. Honestly, I think Zeo Reds looks fine, but the other ones are very hit and miss. Some look really cheap, some look really off. Yellows in particular looks weird, and greens looks pretty cheap, so they're very strange and off for me. I think it's nice that they included them, but like I said, they're just off. I swear this isn't an ad for off bug spray. But anyway, so final verdict time, guys. I have some mixed feelings on this thing. I think it's really cool that they released this and they started a potentially new subset of a line with something non-Mighty Morphin. And I want to give them props for that, and I think for the most part it's something pretty cool. But I'm a little bit surprised by how cheap some of it is, again, for the price. So what I would say is, if you're a huge Zeo Megazord or Ohranger Robo fan, I can recommend checking this out, especially if you like something that's more articulated, but wait for some sort of discount or some way you can get a discount on it. Honestly, even though I think it's got its cool aspects, just for the price it doesn't feel worth it for me. Maybe I'm off base, but that's just what I feel. For what you're paying, I feel it shouldn't feel that cheap in some aspects, even though I think it's got some cool things to it. And I certainly, again, welcome them continuing this type of line and improving. I would also love to see something like, it would probably be kind of expensive, but like a 5-pack of the Super Zeo Megazord individual Zords, or the Shogun Zords or something. But anyways, guys, that's about it for this one. Until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you can get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.